So, Didi, of course, you've heard of several cults within India and you've heard of several cults. But have you ever heard of a Hollywood person running a cult?
See, I'm honestly very fond of reading about cults, watching YouTube videos, but this is a new one.
This is a new one indeed, right? And it's not like the cult of, being rich people, being elitist and, being exclusive. Not like that. This is a real cult.
Okay, I'm really eager to know the story. The San Francisco area of California in the 1960s and 70s went through a renaissance during and after the end of the Vietnam War, and it became a popular destination for people looking for freedom and self expression. Arguably, no one embodies self expression more than actors, and in the 1970s, many of them flocked to the theater of all possibilities, and more specifically to a man named Alex Francis Horn and his wife, a woman named Sharon Horn Gantz. Horn was a playwright with less than mediocre fame. He supposedly wrote about 6 plays, while his wife, Sharon, was a star in one movie called Slaughterhouse-Five. However, their minor fame is not what attracted people to them. It was a commune they had set up called the Theatre of All Possibilities, which they later renamed to the Everyman Group. This was more than just a group. For actors, it was a sanctuary for dreamers, a haven where the boundaries of reality blurred, and the stage became a canvas for endless exploration. Classes were held, talents were nurtured, and the group thrived under a glow of artistic passion. Yet, behind the curtain of creativity, a darker narrative unfolded. Members, drawn in by the promise of artistic fulfillment, found themselves trapped in a web of manipulation. The Horns, both Sharon and Alex, were masters of persuasion and manipulation. They made these young actors work for them. In fact, these students were forced to pay large sums of money as tuition to gain knowledge and wisdom. Instead, these students ended up selling tickets for shows on the streets, and the students were assigned quotas for selling tickets of Alex Horn's plays, in which Sharon acted. Failing to do so meant that these people would have to pay out of pocket. So far, this cult sounds reasonable, but Sharon and Alex pitted these young actors against each other and verbally degraded them in front of the entire community. These students built set with trembling hands. They sold tickets on rain-soaked streets and served dinners with forced smiles plastered across their faces. Each task, no matter how menial, had to be performed with unwavering dedication. For these people were led to believe that it was their duty to serve the greater artistic cause. The Horns presented themselves as people who could guide these young actors through the philosophy of 2 obscure philosophers rooted in the esoteric teachings of George Gurdjieff and his student Ouspensky. Their philosophy together is called the Fourth Wave. But these actors became addicted to more than just Gurdjieff or Ouspensky. They became addicted to the community that Alex and Sharon had forged for them, where they threw in a little praise while in the middle of a lot of abuse. Both Alex and Sharon wielded their influence with precision, convincing these disciples that sacrificing their time and labor was a privilege, an honor bestowed only upon a chosen few. Both Sharon and Alex controlled a substantial income of their students, which was always paid in cash. However, after the San Francisco Chronicle ran a story about these two, exposing their group in the year 1978, these two seemingly disappeared from the Bay Area virtually overnight. Sharon and Alex fled to their ranch in Montana, which was purchased from the money they earned from running the Theater of All Possibilities. Eventually, this group set up shop in New York City, away from the whispers and doubts that plagued Sharon and Alex in California. Robert Klein, a student of theirs, started a satellite school in Boston under the tutelage of the Horns. The New York group regularly met in people's homes initially and then began renting meeting spaces on Broadway in Lower Manhattan. The people who attended these workshops paid around $400 a month for the privilege of discussing philosophy. In addition, these students were offered acting classes as well as they were made to box each other. Women were supposed to clean and cook for Sharon and help maintain her retreat in upstate New York, in Montana, and even her house inside the Ritz-Carlton hotel. In addition, all the students who were under Sharon's tutelage had to pay for her extravagant birthday gifts and had to participate in the retreats in both Montana and upstate New York, which was an intensive, immersive experience where the men were forced to work in construction projects around Sharon Gann's Montana property, which was acres and acres of land, while the women, of course, cooked and cleaned. However, it's really important to keep in mind that the people that Sharon and Alex recruited in New York were not run-of-the-mill people. These people were surgeons, lawyers, bankers, diamond merchants, and held illustrious positions in Manhattan. As the years progressed, people saw more and more of Sharon, who would usually drunk out of her mind in her meetings. She would sit herself down on her lazy boy chair and start to belittle one or two of the participants and then make the others humiliate them. She would also make sure that everybody sat silently while she belittled the people. In case someone spoke up after she was finished belittling them, she would say that this was their outer you, who is resistant to critique. She would say things like, if you keep your walls up, you will not be able to fix yourself. Around 1986, a second group was formed in New York and recruiting efforts were stepped up. Alex Horne's behavior became a problem. So, during the late 1980s, he was effectively removed from as the group's leader through some sort of an internal coup. By the end of 1988, Sharon Gans had stolen all control of the organization, both in New York and Boston. However, Alex Horne continued to hold on to a handful of students in Manhattan. This cult was so obscure that they referred to their group as quote-unquote the work, or simply called it the school. The group later incorporated under various names like the Odyssey Study Group, the Good Omen Incorporated, Every Man Incorporated, Hudson Valley Artists Foundation, Fountain Ridge, New York Playwrights Association, among others. The beliefs, the structures, and the practices of this organization is supposedly devoted to the fourth way, which is a tradition defined by the philosophy of Gurdjieff, who was born in the year 1866 and died in the year 1949, and his philosophy is contained in the writings of his student Ouspensky, who was born in the year 1878 and died in the year 1947. Gurdjieff's basic teaching is that people live in a waking sleep, and that transcendence from this sleeping state requires a specific inner work, which is to be practiced in private, quiet conditions in the midst of life with others. This inner work is supposedly done to access deeper levels of awareness and possibilities for personal development. Ouspensky at one point lived in the United States and organized this philosophy into a system. He taught this philosophy in classes beginning in the 1920s until his death in the late 1940s. Alex and Sharon's group claimed to base its teachings in this fourth way tradition and follows the philosophy of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky with a lot of twists of their own. If someone was being recruited to become a member of the school, they were told things like, this is a group of friends who are in search of meaning, or this is just a group of people who are very like-minded and would like to grow in the same direction. A school for inner development, or a school which bases itself on inquiry into the truth. The people who were recruiting these new recruits were no less than Yale and Harvard graduates with shiny, good-looking exteriors. These were successful people who had a lot of interests in what was going on around the world. Sharon Gans was regarded and treated by people of this group as a quote-unquote conscious being. She was often referred by these people in a reverential tone simply as the alphabet S, or they would call her our friend Sharon, or simply just would call her Sharon. But her decisions, her wishes, her commands and whims were never questioned. And members of the group often asked Sharon for guidance involving work, involving relationships, involving family life. And she would arrange marriages between people within the group. In fact, a corporate attorney called Spencer Schneider, in his book about this cult, writes that he was arranged to marry a woman who was slightly older to him, a woman named Cynthia May, who was a dedicated follower of this cult and already had a teenage daughter. And since she was about the age of 41, 42, Sharon told Spencer that Spencer should in fact sleep with his wife's daughter, his stepdaughter, who was all of 17 years old at that time. Both Cynthia and Spencer were disgusted and horrified at this suggestion of incest. And Cynthia and Sharon had a baby boy of their own without performing any kind of incest, thankfully. Interestingly, Cynthia's daughter and Spencer's stepdaughter attended Juilliard and is now married to the famous actor Adam Driver. However, despite Sharon's degrading conduct, many people stuck with her. In the early years of the group in New York, Sharon forbade people from mingling with each other. She would tell people not even to look at each other or take the same cab back from the meetings. But later, she allowed it, and that's when a lot of people sought refuge and began dating each other. Sharon herself was vehemently opposed to homosexuality and only allowed entry to homosexual men who would agree to marry women within the cult. She made them go through convulsive therapies. She was also vehemently against anyone of color joining the cult. And interestingly enough, she made people celebrate Christmas though ironically, both Sharon and Alex were both Jewish. Spencer Schneider, whose book I mentioned earlier, was in an unhappy relationship and wanted to leave for decades and could see right through the megalomania of Sharon Horn Gans. But he had two main reasons why he stuck around, which reflects the reasons that many people have when they're stuck in these kind of groups. One is that his wife Cynthia refused to quit. Cynthia herself was a performer and a dancer, and she was dependent on the other people of the cult as her benefactors. Secondly, Spencer himself, who was a corporate attorney, was representing a wealthy real estate mogul as his primary client. Similar reasons kept everyone in, and Sharon would force people to even give up their children and make decisions to adopt those children within the same cult group. She would take your children away if she disliked you, and she would give your children to someone else who she actually liked. These children were often not told about these arrangements, and they lived their life in ignorance. Sharon would take so much time from these people's lives that other than their jobs, they had little to no time to do anything else. So the world of these people shrank and became even smaller. They had no time for hobbies, no time for friendships, and none whatsoever for family. Sharon made them cut off their familial relationships. As a matter of fact, Spencer Schneider hardly spoke to his mother and his brother for the 23 years that he was in this cult. Over the years, Sharon Gans elevated a select few of his devoted followers to the rank of teachers. And it was this cadre of core teachers who ran numerous classes and activities on Sharon's behalf throughout New York and Boston. Sharon Gans herself devoted a few hours each day over the phone from her luxurious Manhattan apartment or one of her residencies, and she would bark out orders from the iconic Plaza Hotel in New York. Sharon's group went through great lengths to deny that they were a cult. In the year 2002, when one of the group members made a documentary which was later nominated for the Oscars, this was a movie called Artists and Orphans, a true drama, which was directed by a woman called Leanne McNally, who was a former producer for CBS News. And for her movie, she recruited the famous Hollywood celebrity Rosie O'Donnell to voice this documentary. However, when Rosie O'Donnell discovered that Leanne McNally was a member of the cult which was run by Sharon Gans, Rosie demanded that her voice be removed because she did not want to get associated with Sharon Gans, who everyone knew was against homosexuality and was the leader of a cult. Members of the group and new recruits who dared to use the cult word were criticized and humiliated and belittled. Sharon employed the 3 Ds of manipulation which often happens in cults, which has been identified by Margaret Singer, who wrote her thesis in the field of cult manipulation. The first D stands for deception, the second D stands for dependency, and the third D stands for dread. Now, the deception clearly was that Sharon Gans duped people into believing that being a part of the school will enrich their lives. So that's the biggest dupe that they went through. That was the first part of the deception. The dependency was obtained by gradually isolating cult members from outside influences. She established unrealistically high and guilt-inducing expectations. She punished people for their negativity or denigrated people even more when they would think critically or speak up and be independent. She formed an environment which was compliance oriented, and she would love bomb people and then suddenly take away all the affection. Once a state of dependency was firmly established, Sharon Gann's group control took over people's thoughts, their feelings, their behavior. And people dreaded, they were really scared of losing their group's psychological support. All these people who were members of the group invariably had to keep their lives within the group a secret. And imagine these people had to attend these sessions at least twice a week for a couple of hours, and then these people would disappear for weeks on end on their Montana or New York retreats. When their family members would ask them where they were forbidden from telling anyone where they were. So most of these relationships that people had outside of the school would invariably break. Even communication among the members outside of the scheduled meetings or without the presence of a teacher was severely restricted. In fact, people were sanctioned if they would speak to each other. If someone ever broke any rules, she would shun them, she would excommunicate them, she would cut off their support from all the group members. And the people who stayed with her, she made them feel a sense of superiority. She made them think that people outside of the group were in fact walking in a reverie and were asleep. And the ones who were truly awake were people within the group. Sharon Gans continued to do this till the end of her life, which was in the year 2022, when she finally died of COVID-related complications. After her death, she did not leave any of her property to her children. One of her children who was initially in the group was a man called Jimmy, and he cut ties from her, so of course she did not give him anything. She in fact left a lot of her property to those people who were her minions in the group. And after her death, a lot of people have in fact filed lawsuits against her estate so that they can get some sort of funds back for all the years that they wasted in her cult. In the early 2000s, two women had already filed a case against her, but unfortunately, they lost that case. Some say that Adam Driver's mother-in-law is still a member of the cult, and she's in fact one of the teachers who's still teaching this out there. So, what did you think about this cult? Let me know about your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until I see you next, stay collectively vigilant.
Okay, one thing I've noticed about most cults, their initial teachings, activities, or workshops are based on real psychological practices. So if you look at it, essentially, cult provides a form of therapy. It provides you that network where you feel safe, which works in short term. Definitely it works in short. So their members definitely see real improvements in their lives. This process can hook them. And of course, this makes them susceptible to brainwashing. And then things slowly start getting worse over a period of time. So Didi, are you saying that all cults are not religious? Are you saying that cults can be political, they can be based on self-improvement, some cults might be therapy-based? So are you basically saying that one does not have to be in a religion to be in a cult?
Not all cults are religious. See, we have to understand a typical cult requires a high level of commitment. It's like you are promising yourself to that cult. So they expect their members to maintain a strict hierarchy. They want to separate unsuspecting supporters and recruiters from their inner workings.
Right, so because that's exactly what this woman did, right? In the Manhattan cult that we were just talking about, this is exactly what Sharon Gans did. Wow, okay, so you're pointing out all these amazing things. I never thought about them.
Okay, I would like to pinpoint one more thing here, that somehow it seems that your cult claims to provide answers to life's biggest questions.
Okay, a little correction there. It's not a cult that I'm running. I was just simply telling you the story of the Manhattan cult. Yeah, but you're right. I mean, Sharon Gans and her husband were basically saying that, we have a recipe to change everyone's life. Let me shape your life, and you would be so much better than you are right now. So yes, they do try to answer life's biggest questions, and all of us have exactly the same questions. How do I come to my maximum potential? How do I achieve as much as I can? How can I be as beautiful as I can? How can I be as rich as I can? I think all of us want similar things in life.
Sometimes people are just looking for comfort, somebody to talk to, somebody who listens to them. So most importantly, cult uses both formal and informal systems. They want to influence their members, they want to keep control, they want to maintain control. So basically it's about obedience.
Yeah, but then what I've noticed is that initially they might have like a chill kind of version towards obedience, but later on they really want very obedient members. They are they show very little tolerance towards any kind of disagreement with the person who's actually running the cult. So after a while they become quite strict. Initially they might not be strict.
Yeah, initially they just want people to enroll, basically, if I can use the word enroll here. They just want them to feel comfortable. They just want them to feel wanted. So if you look at it, Kay, rather than providing guidelines for members to live a better life, a cult seeks to directly control them. So it would be personal and family relations to financial assets and living arrangements, giving out all the information about your personal life. So then later these cults will deny you your basic freedom of thought, speech, association. They might shun their members' psychological and emotional growth.
So what you're saying is that once you're part of a cult, the cult leader would want you to disclose even the smallest detail of your life. As a matter of fact, they thrive on gathering this information because they basically hold that information against you later on, so that okay, now I understand what you're saying. So you're saying that initially they might look a little bit chill, but they would demand a lot of obedience later on. Many cults become quite authoritarian later on, and mostly cults are basically run by people who are narcissists, people who are completely motivated by money and greed and power, so on and so forth. But initially, Didi, I don't know if you've noticed this, people who usually run cults have a lot of personal charisma.
I agree. They're very charismatic. These, they will attract initial followers. They'll expand work like a pyramid scheme. Then where, once you become a cult member, these early members will start recruiting newer ones.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is literally like a pyramid scheme. And then once you become a member, the way you show that you're completely dedicated to the cause is not only are you indoctrinated yourself, you would also make sure that others around you are indoctrinated as well. And the minute the cult leader sort of sees that you might be sort of going away from them, they want you to relinquish all control over your personal relationships. They will, as a matter of fact, they will alienate you from your own family members, from your own friends, right? So you basically are friendless, are relationless, you're acquaintance-less, and that's how they have more control over you.
Cults play on our natural inclination to mimic social behavior or follow orders. So other methods cults follow may be more intense, using techniques of coercive persuasion involving guilt, shame and fear.
So Didi, but I've noticed one thing. The kind of things that you're talking about, it seems like what cults want us to do is, it's not out of the ordinary. They just want, most cults usually end up mimicking social behaviors that we follow anyway in life. For example, I don't know if you've noticed this, but it does seem like even in the Manhattan cult, after a while she was guilting people into staying, she was shaming people into staying. There was also a sense of fear that she had instilled in people, which I really found really interesting, because this woman was just like a tiny woman. It was not like she was a tall person who would or like a bulky woman who would beat the crap out of anyone. Not at all. I mean,
it's all this coercive psychological control that this woman had over others and even over men. And one more thing, of course, is did you notice none of these people are quote unquote losers? I mean, they were surgeons, they were lawyers, they were stockbrokers, they were diamond merchants. These kind of people were in the cult. And isn't that really interesting that none of them were like what society would call losers or failures?
Can I point something out here? It is my personal opinion that maybe because she looked the way she looked, it made her less intimidating.
You're right. Okay. Yeah, because if someone's so scary, you would probably run away very quickly. And because she is so unassuming.
Very harmless. And whatever she says sounds right, sounds correct.
Wow. So, exactly. That's why people leave all doubts behind. And then the only thing they end up doing is that they model absolute faith for this person. And that's the kind of thing that these kind of narcissists thrive on.
Okay, people usually go to cults or join cults during a point of time when they are at their lowest or are facing certain type of crisis. So it becomes very easy for them to be attracted towards that cult or the member who's trying to, initiate them into it.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, if I'm going through some sort of crisis in life, I would love to go to a person who seemed to have all the answers. They seem to have their life together. They seem to be successful. And that's how these cults, they grab hold of you and they don't let you go for years on end. Or in the case of this particular Manhattan cult, it was literally decades on end. People lost decades of their life under this woman. And some of them are actually still under that control, although this woman's now dead, as I told you in the story. Anyway, that does it, folks, for our analysis of not only the Manhattan cult. Of course, that was the story with which we were trying to, sort of analyze how psychological warfare works, how absolute and coercive control works. But let us know your thoughts, and until we see you in the next episode, stay collectively vigilant.